Expert insight, clear analysis, strategy in action. Welcome to the CEO to CEO podcast, featuring the world's top CEOs. The podcast will welcome honest conversations meant to challenge traditional ways of thinking from fellow global industry leaders. This podcast will also explore the intricate world of M&A from an insider's perspective. M&A is a big deal, one in which you can drive the future of your business, your industry, and even the trajectory of the marketplace. This podcast is hosted by Kevin Campbell, CEO of Syniti. Syniti is a global enterprise data solution provider specializing in data operations and data transformation. Kevin is a global champion in data and has served as the former Group Chief Executive Officer at Accenture and COO of Oscar Insurance Corporation. Today, Kevin is joined by Ryan Rodenburg, founder and CEO of DMR. Ryan has dedicated his career for the past decade to the single pursuit of assembling the best talent in data migration, quality, and governance. Ryan has worked in SAP talent management for the past 20 years. He established DMR's talent-first culture and actively focused on the recruitment of the best and brightest in the SAP data management industry. With a strong focus on delivering specialized services to meet the client's specific data challenges, DMR paves the way with true partnership and engagement from start to finish. Syniti and DMR recently merged and are taking a bold step forward to address the need for end-to-end enterprise data management.
Welcome to this week's CEO to CEO podcast. This week, we're fortunate to have on with us Ryan Rodenburg. Ryan is the CEO of DMR, who's recently just announced their merger with Syniti. Ryan, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Kevin, thank you. Glad to be here.
Ryan, why don't you, we'll have a chance to talk about your merger coming up, but how about if we start with talking a little bit about your founding of DMR?
I founded DMR back in 2012 after about 10 years in the SAP ecosystem, largely in staff augmentation. Really started my career with another startup venture where we were solely focused on technology staffing, and a bit of luck, Kevin. We found ourselves square in the SAP ecosystem with a couple of foundational customers, and as we navigated that and began to support large ECC implementations of SAP, we clearly identified that data was a common theme and a common challenge for a number of our customers. And really, as we began to realize the common challenges of staff aug, we set our sights on building something of more substance and more power and long-term value, and really wanted to build a practice dedicated to data management. And so, about 2012, I believe, we kind of sat down and architected and designed what we thought would be the keys to success for building a practice that really was designed around the best people and building methodology and IP to support those folks and really solving the data challenge in that SAP ecosystem.
I point to you as an example of a lifelong entrepreneur. So maybe you tell us a little bit about, when you thought about the opportunity, how'd you evaluate the risks, which are probably many all the time, versus the opportunity, and decided that this was something you guys wanted to focus on?
You're right. I've been, essentially an entrepreneur my entire career, and you learn a lot of hard lessons along the way, Kevin, and learn how to evaluate risk, I think, appropriately. And my approach to how I've built all my businesses has always been bootstrapping. We've never gone and raised capital. We've never taken outside investment, and so in a way that minimizes risk and pressure a little bit, but at the same time it challenges you to scale and all the things that are prerequisite to scale, and the typical challenges of essentially being in startup mode over an elongated period of time. For us, I think the DMR story was an easy one because data was such a critical path item, right? Everywhere we looked, and we had really built essentially a mini competency inside of our staffing business by virtue of the necessity and demand created within our existing customer base. It was clear to me that there was an opportunity to accelerate that and really provide a much broader value to our customer if we could bring more than talent, right? If we could aggregate a group of talent and take them from program to program, and then build upon that with, a methodology and a playbook and IP, which we slowly built over the years and really continue to design around, putting talent first, people first, and relationships first, and then filling in the gaps in terms of maturing the overall model.
You talked about the people first, and one of the questions I wanted to ask, and I like to ask all entrepreneurs, is kind of, what are your principles or the things that have guided you along the way in making decisions?
There's one kind of paramount to all others for me, and that is people, right? And I say people broadly. It starts with our employees, right, and making sure that we value and treat our employees at the highest possible level, right? They're paramount to everything we do. We fundamentally understand the notion that we're while we have software and we have a strong playbook, it takes the right people to execute those things. And without really valuing people as our primary asset, we really don't have much. And so that's a core tenet, and that extends beyond our employees, right? I think you take people and you really identify that as relationships, and for me, those relationships really drive our success. And whether it's the relationship with the customer, relationship with our employees, relationship with our partners and vendors, all of those really matter, and I think foundationally become part of a culture of trust, right? And building trust with your own internal folks, building trust with your partners, your suppliers, and building trust with your customers that you're going to deliver upon your promises.
Along the way, did you ever have those moments of, like, should we take this new customer on? Is this too big for us? Is it too risky for us? How did you make some of those decisions?
Every day. every day, right? I mean, there's always the challenge in my mind of scale and the impact of scale on the quality. And so we were, first and foremost, we were focused on not diluting quality, right? And so there definitely were moments where we questioned whether a new client or X amount of new headcount, or building our offshore capability, or looking at an acquisition, all of those things become really, paramount to how you evaluate quality and whether or not you improve or dilute quality. And of course, you're anticipating that, right? You can't predict the future entirely. So each one of those is a bit of a decision tree in terms of how you calculate risk versus reward. I'm happy to say that we never found ourselves in a position to have to say no to new business, right? We never really took a step back and said, we're going to have to just step aside from this one. It's too big, or we're not prepared to scale. We were fortunate that I think we paced ourselves pretty carefully in terms of how we went to market. And we didn't find ourselves in too many situations where those questions were really, really difficult ones to answer.
You did, as far as growth. I mean, you mostly grew organically, right? Largely organically over the years. It's a pretty sizable firm, right? From kind of you and your original ideas and partners to a firm that certainly has global impact and global people today. But you did end up making an acquisition a year and a half ago, maybe a little bit more, down in Latin America. So can you tell us a little bit about that acquisition?
You're right. We had grown organically throughout the history of the organization, right? That was really our overall approach, and hadn't seen the opportunity to look at a tuck acquisition here or there until we really focused on Latin America, right? We saw a big opportunity down there. We see that market as trending just a little bit behind the U.S. And so the S4 market was hitting Latin America. The early adopters were just starting a couple of years ago, whereas that was 3 or 4 years ago in the U.S. And we continue to see residual demand from our existing North American multinational customer base, and it was demand that we couldn't meet, Kevin. And that was, to your prior point of having tough questions to answer around challenges, that whether or not we could meet them. That was a consistent one that we struggled to meet with existing customers, right? We had to essentially walk away from opportunities or not pursue opportunities where Latin American present was required, or a bilingual requirement was there. And so it was clearly an opportunity for us to expand. We found ourselves in partnership with a group down there by the name of DMR. DMR has clear roots in exactly what both Syniti and DMR did at the time. They were squarely focused on enterprise data management, very much centered in the SAP ecosystem. Some really good relationships with the global SIs down there, as well as SAP themselves. And Omar and Daniel, their leadership team was really strong with really a great core client base and group of talent. So it was a really, really great opportunity in my mind to accelerate our growth in Latin America. And unfortunately, those guys saw the same vision that I did. And that was, to your point, about a year and a half ago. And obviously, nobody predicted the global pandemic being, the next thing to knock on our door. So, that always is a challenge to where you see and have predicted the future. But I think we navigated that very well. We had very consistent performance, even in Latin America, where they were impacted more so than I would argue the United States was. And really happy with the results of that so far. And still, quite frankly, Kevin, think that it's largely an untapped market, right? The sky's the limit of what we can do in Latin America.
What impact COVID has had on your business overall? So maybe you give me a flashback to a year plus ago and what's happened since then.
I mean, good question. I feel like I answer this question a little differently each time that I get it, and it's just because your thought process sort of evolves, I think, in terms of the overall impact. I will say, and I think Syniti probably would argue the same. We were well prepared to deal with a remote workforce. We were largely engaged in that type of behavior and work in the past. We had a system for it. We didn't have, a large group of people supporting travel functions and things like that internally, that essentially where job functions disappeared overnight or anything like that. So, other than the natural reaction of our client base and sort of the squeezing of CapEx and the sort of the hesitancy of our large enterprises to move forward with programs that were slated in 2020 and how we had to adapt to that, I would argue that DMR as a whole did very well comparatively as a result of COVID, right? Clearly, we had to adopt new things. We had to get more agile in certain areas. We had to respond to new challenges, but I think we met those challenges very well. And I would argue that if we look back over the impact of 18 months of pandemic, I'm very happy with how we responded as an organization. I'm happy with the performance of the company and feel like we were very, very fortunate.
Yeah, and if I remember some of our conversations, you didn't have to lay anybody off during that time, which is pretty amazing, and actually grew revenue during the period of time. So to our other fellow CEOs that we talk to, they always say, that's a home run in anybody's book.
Yeah, I mean, super proud of that fact, right? I mean, again, back to people being first and our primary asset. Anytime you're put in a position of thinking about having to reduce your labor force, and in our world, it's not a good thing, and certainly it can be cancerous to an organization. And luckily, we never even had to have those conversations, Kevin. We never even evaluated it. In fact, we were hiring with frequency throughout COVID, and so I'm very proud of the fact that we didn't have to have a layoff. We didn't lose a single headcount, and to your point, grew revenue.
How would you describe DMR today, kind of as far as the size, characteristics, clients?
We are pushing 200 headcount globally. We're primarily, as you know, focused in North America with the new presence in Latin America and a good contingency of folks in our GDC that sits in Hyderabad, India. We serve the globe amongst those three regions. We've deployed in 140 countries, I believe, or more. We take pride in feeling like we've amassed the world's best in terms of talent and execution at the services level, and really have put together a playbook that we're super comfortable with, driven largely, as you know, Kevin, by a North American client base of multinational Fortune 1000s. We span most industries. We've got a heavy footprint in retail, but we're certainly very present in oil and gas and life sciences, and have a big presence in ag and CPG as well. So I would say we're a diverse organization. We span the globe. we, have, to your prior point, we've grown organically and somewhat pragmatically or cautiously, you might call it, over the years. But a sizable boutique organization that's laser focused on enterprise data management, and I use enterprise data management maybe a little loosely, because while if you look at our portfolio, we're largely SAP centric. I would say that DMR, does have a little bit of diversity in terms of the portfolio that we deliver and the technology that we employ to deliver. Right, we look at, and I've always had the vision, Kevin, of being a trusted data partner to the enterprise. Right, not just a data migration provider or a data governance or data quality provider, but really the trusted partner that we hope our clients look to us anytime they have a data challenge, which, as you and I know, is daily. Right, large organizations struggle with data, every single day, and how we essentially define solution selling and being agile and flexible in terms of offering a broad value to our customers, something we've been focused on. So we step outside of SAP, and we've delivered large Salesforce programs, Workday programs, data strategy programs, built big data lakes for organizations, gotten into unstructured data. We've done single view of the customer for companies like Under Armour, and really started to diversify our portfolio and hopefully can be that more holistic data partner to our global client base.
You largely grew the organization organically. You had a good acquisition. Obviously, we started conversations between Syniti and DMR over a year ago. What made you decide that now might be the time to combine forces versus continue on the organic path?
Yeah, I mean, look, that's a big question, and there's a lot of different reasons that go into essentially arriving at the answer that I did, and spent a lot of time thinking about it, Kevin. But I think if you try to boil that down to an inflection point or sort of the triggering element that got me over the hump, was really the leadership and the vision at Syniti, and the shared vision and cultural values between the two organizations. I just felt like, look, we share a lot around who we are as a company, what we do as a company, our vision for the futures of these companies apart. And it was clear to me that we were going to bang on each other and beat each other up in the market and continue to struggle and create challenges within our own ecosystem of partners and customers, and really confuse the market as much as anything else. Right. And I think dilute each other, right? And in many cases, dilute ourselves. And so it was pretty clear to me that the combination not only basis the leadership, but the vision of the two organizations and the culture of the two organizations would combine to be not just an addition equation, right? But a multiplication equation, right? One that really, I think, is a multiplier in terms of the value that we can provide to our customers and our ability to scale and maintain quality.
So as an entrepreneur, then how do you go execute a transaction for that? How do you, you hadn't done one before, right? So, what's the 101 that you use to learn new things?
Well, the first answer, Kevin, is way too many lawyers, right?
Amen to that.
Look, it's been a learning curve for sure, and it's I'm not going to lie, it's been arduous, right? This is a long journey. It's certainly longer than I would have ever anticipated. A lot of diligence. When you take the complexity of entities and global entities and subsidiaries and dependencies, and in the grand scheme of things, this probably is not a very large transaction, but the complexities for the size of the transaction, I think, were pretty extreme and very nuanced. So, of course, you rely on advisors, right? You rely on the advice of counsel, you rely on the advice of bankers, and you learn a lot along the way. But you know better than anybody, Kevin, there's been a lot of hard work that's gone into this, and a lot of sleepless nights. And so, happy to be across the finish line, as they say, and on to the next chapter, which will present its own challenges, right? But look, we were in process for almost a year, I would say, right, in terms of diligence and transaction related efforts. So for me, it was net new. I didn't go in with a playbook. I didn't go in with a bias. I just trusted the folks that I had engaged to advise. Obviously, worked really well, I think, with the Syniti team, and everybody was quite graceful given some of the challenges and hurdles we had to get over. And net, I think we did really good work.
And I think some of that we had a basic belief in the power of the combination, and that kept us going, right?
Yeah, nobody lost enthusiasm, right? I think we tested that. We tried to get people to lose enthusiasm to the best of our possible abilities. But no, I think everybody saw the vision from day one, saw the power of the combination, saw that we both had a lot to learn. As much as we're the same companies doing the same things, boy, we've got a lot to learn from each other too, right? Which is exciting for me, right? We do things differently, we approach things differently, and that presents opportunity to get better, right? And from both angles. And so, I think the power of the combination, the vision of the combination of the organization, the shared history, really became a positive in the whole equation and a driver to get this thing completed.
As we wrap up, there's two questions I always like to ask, and so you can combine the answer, which is like, who have you been your mentors along the way? And what's the best career advice or entrepreneurial advice you've gotten from any of those mentors?
That's a really good question. And I've got a few people that I rely on for advice. I started a business with my dad, and he was a driver. He spent his whole career in corporate HR, and he's been the one that's been driving behind everything I do, the power of people, right? And that people, no matter what business you're in, people will always be your most important asset, and really hammered that home at an early age for me. And I don't know, I wish I could attribute this to somebody and give them due credit for this, because it's the best advice and the simple advice that anyone's ever given me, and I try to live to it on a daily, and that's keep it simple, right? I really believe in doing our very best to sort to the easiest, simplest outcome and answer, and not over engineering. And so I've really worked hard to embody that throughout my career, right? Keeping things as simple as possible.
Ryan, thanks for being on today, and thanks for your advice that you have for people. I think it'll be useful for a lot of people to listen to. And again, we're trying to connect with entrepreneurs. So everybody, join us next time on CEO to CEO, where we'll talk to another entrepreneur or CEO about their journey and how they got their company to where they are and how they got to where they are. Because in the end, these are all stories about people.
Thank you for joining the CEO to CEO podcast. Join us next time as we uncover data strategies to support mergers, acquisitions, divestitures with the world's top CEOs.